Our next item is our public hearing. Comes to us from Planning and Building Department, and it's regarding safe parking and the shelter pilot program. So at this time, I'd like to open the public hearing. Consider it open. Can we have a staff report, please?
Perfect, thank you. So we have Mary Milner here with us to give us a brief presentation on that. As she begins, one of the things I just want to emphasize that this is, and you said it already, Chair, this is a pilot program. It's for 18 months. So there may be some things associated with this that are of concern, and we recognize that there have been concerns articulated. But we are looking at this as a program to really see how things can function and to allow us then to take a look at what a more permanent ordinance would be based upon the experience over the first 18 months. So with that, Ms. Milner, are you ready to present?
I am ready.
Welcome.
I can share my screen. All right, good afternoon, supervisors and members of the public. Mary Milner here with Long Range Planning to talk about the Safe Parking, Safe Shelter Ordinance. So actually we have two ordinances. One is the Safe Parking, Safe Shelter, and the other companion is the Shelter Crisis Ordinance. So as Director Ford introduced, the Safe Parking, Safe Shelter is an 18-month pilot program, and it's renewable at the end of 18 months by the Board of Supervisors. What it does is provides a safe place to sleep for those experiencing homelessness with or without a vehicle. The second item, the Shelter Crisis Ordinance, is necessary to meet state law in order for us to use the Shelter Crisis Act. And what it does is it applies emergency housing standards in Appendix O and X, which we will also be recommending adoption. And the Shelter Crisis Ordinance has to do with special allowances on publicly owned or leased land. So safe parking, safe shelter sites that were on public land would have special allowances. In order to give potential developers flexibility to adapt to their locations, which in many cases might be away from urban areas, we have proposed two pilot types. And this is to make it easier to adapt to the geography, the staffing levels of the pilot operators, and their funding sources, which will also impact what they can afford to do. So the first model is we're calling safe parking because it accommodates vehicles, vans, or RVs. And the type of vehicles to be accommodated is chosen by the service provider. The second pilot type is we're calling safe shelter. And these are non-vehicle types of shelters, which would be tents, cabins, or other approved structures. And that's where the Appendix O and X building codes come in. So for this pilot program, the sites are operated by providers that are either a government entity, a nonprofit organization, or a religious organization. On-site staff are required during all the hours of operation. The ordinance requires a management plan and specifies objective standards. So we have identified 3 pre-approved management plans that were developed in coordination with the Department of Health and Human Services and local service providers to help potential pilot operators identify their own best practices, while also incorporating requirements of the ordinance. The three plans are, looking from left to right on the chart, the minimal requirements model, the village model, and the low barrier model. The management plans shown here increase in complexity in service level, the required staff, and operating costs from left to right. The idea is to make these pilots available to a variety of different providers with a variety of different resources and in different locations. So regardless of which plan is chosen, each provider must adhere to its management plan. And the plan's a written document that's on file with the planning department as well as posted at the site. So the shelter crisis ordinance comes into play for pilot sites located on publicly owned or publicly leased lands. I understand it's common practice for the government entity to lease the shelter property for $1 a year or some nominal fee in order to take advantage of this. Under the Shelter Crisis Act, these sites are entitled to certain benefits during the shelter crisis. And those are waived liability for the public entity, a waiving of a CEQA review, the fact that public facilities can be used as shelters, relaxing certain codes, and Special Occupancy Parks Act and other laws may be suspended. So while the pilot program, the safe parking safe shelter is designed to work with or without the Shelter Crisis Act, in other words, on private or public property, using county-owned or leased land for the pilots would have significant benefits. So that concludes my presentation.